Hello, Pine Hollow pilots. This is Mr. Osterstrom, also known as Mr. O, which makes it easier. I am one of the three science Pine Hollow teachers, and I will be your narrator for this set of flip notes. These notes will deal with standard 6L.2.1, which is very technical for saying food chains, food webs, and ecosystems. We decided to start here in science with this in virtual school just because the material that we're covering should be something that's familiar to you, something you've seen in elementary school before. So we decided to take a subset of our standards. That's something you should have some comfort or background knowledge with. And if you don't, no worries, we will help you get there along the way. Now, flip notes are very helpful. And what I mean by that is you have some things that you can do that normally do not happen if you were live in a classroom taking notes. You have the power to pause me or this video at any time and use that slide to help document the information on the slide for your note collection. Yes, you'll have to take notes to allow you to have the content, so when we do assignments, you have the accurate information to put into your assignments in order to apply and assess if you understand or what's going on. You're also you're able to rewind the video to hear the material again. So if you don't like in class to put your hand in the air and say, could you say that again? You can also stop, rewind, listen to it again to help you get a better understanding. The third thing is very, very important. If something is confusing to you, unclear, seems crazy, this is odd, please make a note of it. So when you meet with your teacher, you can present that question. This is the benefit of doing flip notes. I'm able to give you the information, but if something's really odd, or something you need more clarity on, write that down. And that is a valuable question when we start doing this content together as a group. I think the real value in doing notes is getting the material, but the things you're unsure about are the things you should ask questions about. So use step 3 to your advantage. And you can always refer back to these when assignments are assigned. So when you get quizzes or activities or projects to do based on the content that's being covered, you're always able to go back to this video to grab the information to help you apply it in situations to help you understand what's going on and help solve problems or tasks given to you by your teacher. In Google Classroom, I provided for you a Google Doc that has this picture of the notes for you. I gave you that, so when you click on it, you get your own copy and you're able to jot down or type in the notes as I go through the slides. You'll notice that my slides are in order of how the notes are structured. So each slide, you put the information in the box to the right. Or if you want to go completely old school, that's really cool. You can just do it on a piece of paper. Just jot down the key topic, which is the thing on the left, and add the key information, which is what will be presented on the slides on the right. All right, let's get started. First thing is matter. Now, typically matter is anything that has mass and volume. You've been learning about matter since kindergarten. You've been learning about solids, liquids, and gases. There's more than those states of matter, but those are the ones you've been learning. But with ecosystems in 6th grade, you need to know two things. And this is what you'll be jotting down in that box. The first is it's transferred from one organism to another. When you think of the word food chain or food webs, the reason why things eat each other is to gain the matter from the other step in the ladder. So matter is transferred from one thing to another. It's also transferred between organisms and their environment. So you think about the sun transferring to the plants, and the plants giving this food, which is step 1, but when that plant dies and it breaks down and gets into the soil, that would be an example of an organism transferring matter to its environment. There's several other different examples of which we'll get into later on. But with matter, these are the two key points that you need to put into your notes. The next is water, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. These are things that you've been talking about a little bit in elementary school, especially in 5th grade with the water cycle. You deal a lot with the water cycle, the different stages of the water cycle. But in 6th grade, the key point here is in the box to the right, you'll be writing down all are cycled between living and non-living things. In 6th grade, you do not need to know the particular steps, meaning in the water cycle, you don't need to know about condensation and precipitation, evaporation, and transpiration. However, you do need to know that these things are cycled through an ecosystem. One of the big ideas of the standards is understanding that things are cycled between living and non-living things. And you don't need to know the particular steps, you just need to know in general that these are cycled. That's why I have in parentheses here the water cycle, the carbon cycle. And I did not get into particulars with those, meaning the little vocab words that go with each of those steps. However, you just need to know that they are cycled. Moving on to food. And when I talk about food, I am talking about glucose. Now, if you're unfamiliar, in the process of photosynthesis, plants make glucose, which is a simple sugar that is used by energy by all living things. So all living things use food for two reasons. The first is they provide building materials. And building materials, I am not talking about bricks or concrete. I am talking about materials that allow a human or an animal or a plant to grow. So you grow based on building materials. They also provide fuel, and fuel is not like gas in a car, but it's similar because it gives you energy. That energy is actually done through the process of cellular respiration, which is in a different standard in 6th grade. However, food is the key to providing those two things in all living things. So keep those in mind and put those in your notes. Energy. Now, energy is very big. You'll see energy. We'll deal with that in a different unit in 6th grade. However, energy in an ecosystem flows in one direction. It's unfortunate that it shares a name with a really bad band. However, it does. You've been talking about this for a while when you learned about food chains and food webs. And that one direction would be energy from the sun goes to producers, and that energy goes to consumers, and that energy goes to decomposers. So that's the direction it will always go. It'll never go from the sun to a consumer because the consumer needs to go to the producer. So that order is very particular. So energy, make sure you have that down. Moving on to sun, and actually it's really sunlight. It's the light energy coming from the sun. And the sun provides energy for plants to make glucose. I referred to that in the previous slide with addressing food. This is just coming back to it again. This is key in this unit, understanding that the energy from the sun creates matter in plants that is used by everything to be transferred. So the sun is very important, and the sun is linked to a different standard, which is photosynthesis, which I please and hope and wish that this is not the first time you heard the word photosynthesis, which means the way plants make their own food. Now, moving on to food chains and food webs. This should not be the first time you heard about a food chain, and hopefully not a food web. Food chain is one complete cycle from producer to decomposer. For example, the grass grows, a cow eats that grass, a wolf eats the cow, and then the wolf dies and maggots break down the wolf. That would be a singular food chain. However, if you think about your backyard, there is so many different food chains that would happen with just starting from the grass. There's not just one animal in your backyard that eats grass. So if you're going to talk about all the different animals that eat the grass and all the different animals that eat those things that ate the grass, that's where food webs come from. So food webs are all the food chains within an area or an ecosystem. They very rarely are shown as an ecosystem just because there's so many different connections in an ecosystem. They are usually done at a very small scale just because even if you think about a very small plot of land can have very, very many different ways something is eaten or is getting eaten by or broken down by. So food webs are they get very messy because they're a web of chains, and those chains could be numerous. So keep that in mind. Now let's go down the food chain components. It starts with green plants. It's just, they are the essential thing. And these are producers of food that are used either directly or indirectly by all consumers. And the reason why I say directly is if you have an animal that's a herbivore or an omnivore, meaning it eats plants. So cows are herbivores, so they only eat plants, but humans are omnivores, so they eat plants and meat. When we're eating plants, we're looking for that glucose. So if we're not eating the plants, something will get eaten that ate plants, and they're looking from the glucose that that former thing got from the plants. So green plants are connected to everything in a food chain because they're either directly or indirectly used by everything that eats something. Producers, and I used a picture here that's underwater. Just be aware that a lot of producers are underwater. They obtain energy directly from the sun via photosynthesis, and they produce their own food. This is a very good example of how science does not like to dilute the reason why they use certain words. They're called producers because they produce their own food, and produce means to make. It'd be a lot better world if we were producers because we would not have high grocery bills. However, we are not. We are in the next category known as consumers. And consumers are living things that need to consume glucose from other sources to survive. Just like producers, they're called consumers because they have to consume their food or energy, and consume means to take in. So anything that cannot make their own food has to take it in from something else. So either directly from a plant or an animal that hasn't been in contact with the plant or down the chain. Now, next thing is consumers. Now, these living things, they need to consume glucose from other sources to survive. They include scavengers. Now, keep in mind when you were in elementary school, you learned about primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, and sometimes your teacher even maybe would have broke scavengers into a different category. In sixth grade, you just need to know the similarity between all four of those or all different kinds of those, which means they need to consume something else to survive. The only thing different about scavengers than any other consumer is they only eat dead things. And we are very thankful that the world has scavengers like the turkey vultures you'll see around the Raleigh area. The world is cleaner with them. And last but not least is my favorite, because people think they're gross, but I think they're fantastic, is decomposers. They decompose dead things and return nutrients to the environment. We will address this in the soil unit in sixth grade. However, one of the factors in soil unit is nutrients, and one of the ways the nutrients get there is by decomposers. These could be worms, mushrooms, the insects. You gotta be a little careful when you look at the picture of insects with a fly there, because it's really fly larvae act as a decomposer, because flies, when they get older, become predators. And then bacteria of all different sorts. This is a generalization picture, obviously, and decomposers, there's more than just four than on my picture, but hopefully it gives you a connection to the idea of decomposers. Now, some people will even argue that decomposers are the beginning of the food chain because they are putting the nutrients in the soil and plants come from the soil. Either way you look at it is fine. You just need to know it goes from a cycle from producers, consumers to decomposers. All right, that's your first set of flip notes. Remember that step 3, if you have any questions or comments or concerns, please write them down and ask your teacher when you get together about these notes to ask those questions to get clarifying answers or to expand on your thoughts. I hope everyone is well and look forward to seeing you all in class.